Imagine this scenario. You're a few weeks into managing your new team and you sit down for a one-to-one conversation with one of your direct reports. About 10 minutes into the conversation, they ask the question that every manager eventually hears. What will it take for me to get to the next level? You want to give a meaningful answer, but what comes out is something quite vague. Show more responsibility, take more leadership, be more strategic. The words sound right, but you can already see the look on their face. Quite clearly, they were hoping for something more concrete. And to be honest, so are you. Now imagine the same conversation, only this time you can pull up a document that shows them exactly where they are today, where they want to go, the specific competencies and skills that separate the two, and even the compensation ranges for both. The conversation shifts. It is no longer a guessing game, but rather a concrete roadmap. And that document does indeed exist at Elevate. We call it our career progression framework, and it is one of the most important tools you will use as a manager. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through how the framework, works, what makes it essential, and how you can use it to have those career conversations with confidence. My name is Swapnil Gyani, and here's an overview of Elevate's career progression framework. Let's get started. Now, before we get down to the details, let us talk for a minute about why this framework exists in the first place. In 2024, we set out to build a global professional development plan with a specific goal: to take the guesswork out of career growth. There were three problems we were trying to solve. The first was clarity for the individual. Most companies tell their people that growth is earned without ever defining what that actually means. People end up reading tea leaves, comparing themselves to their peers, and hoping and praying that their manager notices their successes. We wanted every elevator to be able to point to their current role, look at their aspirational role, and see in plain language exactly what separated the two. The second was consistency for the company. A compliance analyst in Manila and a compliance analyst in London should both be evaluated against the same expectations. A manager in discovery and a manager in people should both know what manager means at Elevate, even though their day-to-day work is quite different. This framework gives us exactly that: a shared language that holds across geographies, business units, and functions. The third was trust. We decoupled performance ratings from compensation back in 2018, and we then took it a step further by sharing compensation ranges with every elevator. This kind of radical pay transparency only works if there is a credible structure underneath all of that. The career framework is that structure. It is what lets us tell every elevator with confidence: here's the role you're in, here's the expectations, and here is the range of compensation that role pays in your geography. That is the philosophy behind the framework. Now, let us take a look at how it actually works. The first thing to know about the framework is that it has two parallel tracks: one for people managers and one for individual contributors. Both tracks share the same 5 categories, levels, and competencies, and both are equally valued at Elevate. This matters because at a lot of companies, the only path to seniority and meaningful compensation runs through people management. If you do not want to manage people, you hit a ceiling fast. We do not believe that that is right. The skills that make a brilliant individual contributor, such as deep expertise, sound judgment, the ability to solve hard problems independently, are different from the skills that make a great manager, but they are not less valuable. Now, you might think I'm getting a bit too pedantic over here, but I did want to throw in a quick word on exactly what we mean by a level. The framework groups roles into 5 categories, and each category then contains a small range of actual levels. For instance, the first category, called analyst, contains roles at levels 1, 2, and 3. The second category, called lead for people managers and specialist for individual contributors, contains roles at levels 4 and 5, and so on. The categories give us a shared vocabulary across the company. The actual levels within each category give us the granularity we need to recognize meaningful progression along the way. So when I refer to a category by name in this video, think of it as a band that contains a few closely related levels, not a single rung. Here's how the categories line up across the 2 tracks. Both start with the analyst category, where most people enter the company in a delivery role: an analyst, a consultant, an engineer, a lawyer, and so on. From there, the tracks diverge. On the people manager track, the second category is lead, where you start managing small teams as a team lead or a project lead. The third category is manager, where you take on a more broader scope. The fourth category is global leader, the director and partner roles, where you lead major parts of a function or a business all on your own. And the fifth is the executive leader, general manager of one or more business units or the head of a corporate function. On the individual contributor track, the second category is specialist, where you go deeper into your craft as a specialist, consultant, engineer, or lawyer at the next tier of your expertise. The third is expert, where you become a subject matter expert in your domain. The fourth is global leader, same director or partner roles as the manager track, but as individual contributors with deep expertise rather than a team to manage. And the fifth is an individual contributor vice president. A few things worth noticing here. First, both tracks may share the same job titles and compensation ranges across categories, but the job descriptions will be at least a little bit different. A director in the individual contributor track and a director on the people manager track sit in the same categories and have fairly similar accountability, except that one manages people while the other dives deeper into their subject matter expertise. Second, you can move between tracks. Someone who starts as a people manager might step into a deep individual contributor role later, and vice versa. This is a feature of the framework, not a bug. Careers are long, and the path that fits you today may not necessarily be the path that will fit you in 5 years from now. Whichever track you're on, your growth at Elevate is measured against the same 8 core competencies. Now, these are not some abstract competencies that somebody in HR put together in an afternoon of Google Fu. No, we derive them directly from our 12 principles. These principles describe how we behave. The competencies translate those behaviors into observable skills that grow with experience. Here are the 8 competencies, and I'll keep the descriptions brief because the framework itself goes into much more detail. First, analytical thought and problem solving. The ability to gather and analyze information, identify root causes, and find effective solutions. Second, commitment and self-motivation. The drive to improve personal and team performance, take ownership, and hold yourself to high standards. Third, communicating and influencing. The ability to communicate clearly, persuasively, and with sensitivity, both verbally and in writing. Fourth, customer focus. The ability to understand customer needs and concerns and provide sound recommendations and solutions. Fifth, leading and developing others. The ability to contribute to Elevate's vision and help others to grow. Sixth, organizing and managing resources. The ability to plan and organize yourself and others effectively to meet business priorities. Seventh, strategic thinking. The ability to see your role in the broader context of Elevate and use that knowledge to drive action. And eighth, working with others. The ability to form and maintain strong working relationships with others. Now here's the key insight. Every one of these competencies is described at each of the 5 level categories. The competency does not change, but the depth of expertise does. Take analytical thought and problem solving. In the analyst category, you break problems down into their individual parts, gather information from a variety of sources, and use past experience to spot and resolve issues. Solid foundational work. In the lead or specialist category, you are not only required to continue doing those same things, but additionally, you are also expected to start generating new ideas, considering problems from new perspectives, and breaking them down into their component parts to determine next steps. In the manager or expert category, you move from solving problems to anticipating them. You identify critical connections, develop best practices, and frame problems in conceptual terms that others can use. In the global leader category, you prepare for potential problems and contingencies. You are sought out by others for advice, and you make decisions that not only solve the immediate problem but also prevent them from recurring. And in the executive leader category, you're making decisions that balance global strategic goals against local realities and anticipate risks that could disrupt the entire business. Now that is one competency across 5 categories. The other 7 competencies follow the same logic. Each category is a meaningful step up with concrete behaviors you can observe, coach toward, and measure. And remember, within each category, there are still multiple levels of progression. So there's room to grow even within a single category. The levels and competencies are the foundation, but the real practical value of the framework and the part that you will reach for most often are the role profiles. Every role at Elevate has its own profile, and every profile contains 4 pieces of information. First, the job duties. A specialist in people operations, for example, sets up new joiner profiles, drafts offer letters, manages the people operations ticketing system, and coordinates the new hire induction. A manager in learning and development, by contrast, leads the implementation of our online learning platforms, designs role-specific onboarding tracks, and manages our leadership development calendar. Same function, very different jobs. Second is the experience and education required for the role. The specialist might require 2 or 3 years of HR operations experience. The manager would require considerably more, plus a demonstrated leadership of L&D programs in the past. Third, the role-specific competency expectations. This is where the framework truly comes to life. The role profile pulls appropriate behaviors for each of the 8 competencies drawn from the level category that the specific role sits in and lists them in plain language. So when you read a specialist's role profile, you do not see all of the 20 or 30 behaviors that exist for that competency across the entire framework. Instead, you see the 4 or 5 that apply at that specific level. This is what the conversation between you and your team member should focus on. And the final piece is the compensation range. Every role profile includes a compensation range that has been benchmarked for that specific role in that specific geography. A people operations specialist in India has a different range than a people operations specialist in the US, but the methodology behind both ranges is identical. When a new role is added at Elevate, we work with specialized third-party providers to develop a compensation benchmark for it, including base compensation, benefits, and other variable components. These benchmarks are then reviewed every year in the 4th quarter to make sure that they remain competitive in each market. Once a role profile is published, it is shared with every elevator. There are no separate ranges for different audiences, no internal versus external numbers, nothing like that. The document a recruiter shares with an external candidate is the same document that any current elevator can pull up at any time. So how do you use all of this as a manager? Well, 3 things to keep in mind. First, use the framework as a language for career conversations. When a team member asks, what would it take for me to get to the next level? Instead of improvising an answer, pull up their current role profile and the role profile that they're aspiring to. Identify 2 or 3 competencies where the gap is the most pronounced and build a development plan around those. The framework turns a vague aspiration into concrete, smart project. Second, use the framework as the lens for your performance coaching conversations. We cover performance coaching in much more depth and detail in a separate module, but here's the TLDR version of it. The 8 competencies at the level appropriate to each team member's role are the rubric. When you're giving feedback, anchor it to a competency. When you're recognizing strong performance, name the competency. This consistency is what makes feedback actionable rather than personal. Third, use the framework when you're advocating for your team. When you are making a case for a promotion, a compensation adjustment, or a new role on your team, your argument is strongest when it is built on this framework. For instance, I am recommending this team member for a promotion from a level 3 analyst to a level 4 team lead because over the past 18 months, they have consistently demonstrated the following behaviors of the lead category in these specific competencies. That is the kind of conversation that lands every time. Now, a word of caution. The framework is a tool, not a script. It is designed to bring clarity and consistency, but it does not replace your judgment as a manager. You still need to know your people, understand the context of their work, and have the empathy to meet them where they are. The framework gives you the structure, you bring the relationship. Remember that conversation we started with? The team member asking you how to get to the next level and you struggling to find the right words. You now have a solid foundation upon which you can build that conversation. You can show them where they currently are, their current role, their current level. You can show them where they could go, the role that they're aspiring to, the competencies that the role demands, and the compensation that comes with it. You can then help them build a plan to close the gap anchored in observable behaviors rather than gut feelings. That is what the career framework gives you and your team. Not a guarantee of promotion, not a set of corporate hoops to jump through, but a clear, honest, transparent map for growth. The same map, no matter where in the world you sit or what part of Elevate you work in. In the accompanying reading material, you will find a detailed breakdown of all 8 competencies, the full level structure for both tracks, and guidance on how to navigate the role profiles for your team. The framework is only as useful as the conversations it enables. So the next time you sit across from a team member who wants to grow, let this framework be your guide in creating a development plan that is both aspirational and actionable for them. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.